Hello there. Let's talk about something that, for many of us, might feel a little uncomfortable at first glance, perhaps even something we tend to push to the back of our minds. It's a question that might surface during quiet moments of reflection, or perhaps when we're dealing with the affairs of a friend or loved one who has passed. Have you made any arrangements for your own funeral or memorial service? And tied closely to that is another significant question. Should you consider prepaying for those arrangements? It's perfectly natural if your initial reaction is one of slight hesitation. Thinking about the end of our lives isn't typically high on our list of enjoyable activities. It can feel somber, perhaps a bit morbid, or maybe just overwhelming. Where would you even begin? What needs deciding? And goodness, what about the cost? These are all valid feelings and legitimate questions that many people share. You are certainly not alone if you've found yourself delaying this particular task on your to-do list, or if the whole subject feels clouded with uncertainty. But I want to gently encourage you to reframe how you think about this process. Planning for your final farewell isn't really about focusing on death. It's about planning for the peace of mind of those you love, and honestly, for your own peace of mind right now, in the present. It's an act of profound care and responsibility, a final gift you can give to your family and friends. Think about it. When the time comes, your loved ones will inevitably be navigating a period of grief and emotional turmoil. Having clear instructions and arrangements already in place can lift an enormous burden from their shoulders. They won't have to guess what you would have wanted, make difficult decisions under pressure, or potentially face disagreements among themselves about the right way to honor you. Instead, they can focus on remembering you, supporting each other, and beginning the healing process, knowing that your wishes are being respected. Furthermore, making these arrangements yourself ensures that your farewell reflects you, your personality, your values, your beliefs. Perhaps you envision a traditional service, solemn and respectful, or maybe you'd prefer a simple cremation with a scattering of ashes in a meaningful place. Maybe you want a joyous celebration of life, filled with music and stories. Do you want specific readings, hymns, or pallbearers? Have you thought about whether you prefer burial or cremation? If burial, where? Do you own a plot already? If cremation, what should happen with the ashes? These are deeply personal choices, and planning ahead is the only guaranteed way to make your preferences known and, ideally, followed. Without your guidance, your family is left to interpret, and while their intentions will undoubtedly be loving, their interpretation might differ significantly from what you would have chosen for yourself. Beyond the emotional and personal aspects, there's the practical, financial side of things to consider, which often looms large. Funerals and memorial services can be surprisingly expensive. Costs can include the funeral home's services, transportation, the casket or urn, burial plot or cremation fees, the service venue, officiant fees, flowers, death certificates, and potentially more. These expenses can add up quickly, potentially running into thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars. Without prior planning or financial provision, this sudden cost can place a significant financial strain on your surviving family members, adding immense stress during an already painful time. This brings us directly to that second key question. Should you prepay? Prepaying for your funeral seems, on the surface, like a logical solution to the financial concern. You lock in today's prices, protecting against future inflation, and you lift that specific financial obligation from your loved ones. It sounds straightforward, doesn't it? However, the decision to prepay is more complex than it first appears. There are different ways to prepay, through funeral homes directly, via funeral insurance, or by setting aside funds in specific types of accounts. Each method comes with its own set of potential benefits and significant drawbacks. What happens if the funeral home goes out of business? What if you move to a different city or state? Are the funds transferable? Are they truly protected? Is the growth potential of that money better used elsewhere? These are critical questions that need careful examination before committing potentially substantial funds. Feeling a bit overwhelmed by all these considerations? That's perfectly understandable. It is a lot to think about. But please, don't let the complexity deter you. The goal here isn't to make you anxious. It's to empower you with information so you can make informed decisions that feel right for you and your unique circumstances. Taking thoughtful steps now can provide immense reassurance, knowing that you've addressed these important matters with clarity and care. In our time together through this discussion, we're going to break this down into manageable parts. We've started here by acknowledging the topic and why it matters, the emotional relief for your family, ensuring your personal wishes are met, and addressing the financial realities. In the next chapter, we'll delve deeper into the practical steps of planning the arrangements themselves. We'll explore the specific decisions you'll need to consider, from the big choices like burial versus cremation, down to the smaller personal details that make a farewell meaningful. We'll talk about how to document these wishes effectively so they can be easily found and understood when needed. Then, in our final chapter, we will tackle the crucial question of prepayment head-on. We'll carefully unpack the pros and cons of different prepayment options, discuss the safeguards to look for, the potential pitfalls to avoid, and alternative ways to plan financially for end-of-life expenses without necessarily prepaying a specific provider. The ultimate aim is to move from uncertainty or avoidance to a place of clarity and confidence. Whether you decide to make detailed plans, simply outline your basic wishes, prepay everything, or set funds aside in another way, the most important thing is that you've considered the options thoughtfully and made choices that align with your values and provide peace of mind for both yourself and those you hold dear. This is about taking gentle control of a future event, ensuring it unfolds with grace, dignity, and according to your desires, easing the path for those who will walk it after you. Let's embark on this thoughtful journey together. All right, now that we've acknowledged why thinking about these arrangements is such a valuable and loving thing to do, let's gently move into the how. How do you actually go about planning? What are the key decisions you'll want to consider? This isn't about making every single decision right this minute, but rather understanding the landscape of choices so you can begin to form your preferences. Remember, the goal is clarity and peace of mind. Perhaps the most fundamental decision, the one that shapes many subsequent choices, is whether you prefer burial or cremation. This is a deeply personal choice, often influenced by religious beliefs, family traditions, personal philosophy, and sometimes practical considerations like cost or location. There's no right or wrong answer, only what feels right for you. Let's think about burial first. For many, burial feels like the traditional path. It might involve purchasing a cemetery plot, if you don't already own one, and selecting a casket. You'll also need to consider a burial vault or liner, which is often required by cemeteries to prevent the ground from sinking over time. Cemeteries themselves vary widely. Some are affiliated with specific religions, others are municipal or private, some offer serene garden settings, others upright monuments. If you choose burial, think about location. Do you want to be buried near other family members, in a place that holds special meaning? Visiting potential cemeteries can sometimes help clarify your feelings. Consider, too, the long-term upkeep of a gravesite, although often cemeteries handle basic maintenance. The costs associated with burial can be significant, encompassing the plot, the opening and closing of the grave, the vault, the casket, and the headstone or marker. It's important to be aware of these potential expenses. On the other hand, cremation has become increasingly common for a variety of reasons. Some people prefer it for its perceived simplicity, lower cost compared to traditional burial, or for environmental considerations. If you choose cremation, the process involves reducing the body to bone fragments and ashes through high temperatures. These cremated remains are then typically placed in an urn. The question then becomes, what happens to the ashes? There are many possibilities. You might wish for them to be kept by a loved one, perhaps in a decorative urn at home. They could be interred in a columbarium niche at a cemetery, which is like a small compartment designed to hold urns. They could be buried in a smaller plot in a cemetery, sometimes called an urn garden. Or you might envision your ashes being scattered in a place that was meaningful to you: the ocean, a favorite park, a mountain range, though it's crucial to check local regulations regarding scattering, as permissions are often required. Some people even arrange for their ashes to be incorporated into memorial items like glass art or jewelry. Again, the choice is profoundly personal. You might also consider whether you want a viewing or service before the cremation takes place, which is entirely possible. Take some time to reflect on this core choice. Talk with your family if you feel comfortable doing so, not necessarily to seek their permission, but perhaps to understand family traditions or simply share your thoughts. Sometimes just verbalizing your leaning, I've always thought I'd prefer cremation, or it's important to me to be buried near grandma, can make it feel more real and less daunting. Documenting this primary preference is perhaps the single most helpful piece of guidance you can leave. Imagine the relief for your loved ones, not having to debate this fundamental question during their time of grief. I recall one family I knew where the parents had never discussed their wishes. When the father passed, the children had very different ideas. One felt strongly about traditional burial due to their interpretation of his values, while another was convinced he would have wanted the simplicity of cremation. It caused considerable heartache and delay, all of which could have been avoided had their father simply written down his preference. Once you have a sense of whether you lean towards burial or cremation, the next major area to consider is the nature of the service or gathering itself. How do you want to be remembered? What kind of atmosphere feels right for your farewell? Again, the options are broad. You might opt for a traditional funeral service, often held soon after death, usually before burial or cremation, and typically including the body present in a casket. These are often held in a place of worship or a funeral home chapel and may follow a set religious or cultural format. Alternatively, you might prefer a memorial service. This type of gathering often takes place after the burial or cremation, sometimes weeks or even months later, which can allow more time for people to travel and for planning without immediate pressure. The body is not typically present at a memorial service, though an urn containing ashes might be. This format can often feel a bit more flexible than a traditional funeral. Then there's the increasingly popular celebration of life. This type of event focuses more on celebrating the person's life, personality, and achievements, rather than solely mourning the loss. It might be less formal, perhaps held in a community center, a park, a restaurant, or even someone's home. Music might be more upbeat. Stories shared might focus on happy memories, and the overall tone aims for warmth and remembrance of a life well lived. Think about your own personality. Were you someone known for formality and tradition, or for laughter and unconventional approaches? Your farewell can reflect that. It's also entirely valid to choose a very simple graveside service, just a brief gathering at the cemetery plot for burial, or perhaps no formal service at all. Some people are very private and prefer minimal fuss. The key is that the choice aligns with your wishes and values. Within the service itself, regardless of the format, there are details to consider. Who would you like to officiate? A member of the clergy, a professional celebrant who specializes in secular or personalized services, a trusted friend, or a family member? Think about music. Are there specific hymns, songs, or pieces of music that are particularly meaningful to you? Would you prefer live music or recorded selections? What about readings? Are there poems, scripture passages, or excerpts from literature that resonate with your life or beliefs? Who would you like to deliver a eulogy or share remembrances? You can suggest specific people, or simply state that you'd like opportunities for others to share memories if they wish. Consider visual elements too. Would you like photos displayed, perhaps a slideshow or video montage? These elements help personalize the service and make it a true reflection of you. Don't feel you need to script the entire event, but outlining the general tone and perhaps suggesting a few key elements can be incredibly helpful guidance. Beyond the core choices of disposition and service type, there are other specific personal touches you might want to consider. Think about the casket or urn. These range from simple and modest to highly ornate and personalized. You might have preferences about materials: wood, metal, biodegradable materials for green options, or style. You might also have preferences about what you wish to wear or be shrouded in for burial or viewing. Flowers are traditional at many funerals, but you might have specific preferences, favorite flowers, colors, or perhaps you'd strongly prefer that people make donations to a specific charity or cause in lieu of sending flowers. This can be a wonderful way to extend your legacy and support something you cared about. Think about pallbearers, if applicable for a burial. Are there specific people you would wish to honor with this role? It's usually close family or friends, but specifying can avoid awkwardness or uncertainty for your family. Consider transportation. Typically a hearse is used, but you might have other thoughts. And what about a reception or gathering after the service? Sharing food and fellowship can be a comforting experience for mourners. Do you have preferences about where this might happen or what it might entail? Again, don't feel overwhelmed by this list. You don't need to micromanage every detail unless you truly want to. Focus on the elements that are most important to you. Perhaps the music and the readings are paramount. Perhaps ensuring donations go to your favorite animal shelter is your priority. Maybe specifying a simple pine casket or a biodegradable urn aligns with your values. Pick and choose what feels significant. For instance, a gentleman I knew was a passionate gardener. His family knew this, but his written instructions specifically requested that instead of traditional floral arrangements, mourners be invited to bring a single flower from their own garden, creating a wonderfully personal and meaningful tribute. Another woman, known for her vibrant personality, requested everyone wear bright colors to her celebration of life. These specific, documented wishes made their farewells uniquely theirs. Finally, and perhaps most critically, once you've thought through these preferences, even if they are just broad strokes, you need to document them effectively. Simply telling someone your wishes, while a good start, isn't foolproof. Memories can be unreliable, especially under emotional duress. Different people might recall the conversation differently. Written instructions provide clarity and authority. So, where should you record this information? One option is to make formal pre-need arrangements with a funeral home. This involves sitting down with a funeral director, making all your selections, and getting them documented. often with associated costs outlined. You can do this without prepaying, simply using it as a way to record your wishes with a specific provider. We'll talk more about the prepayment aspect in the next chapter. Another excellent option is to create a dedicated document, often called a letter of final instructions, end-of-life plan, or something similar. This isn't typically a legally binding document like a will, but it provides invaluable guidance for your loved ones. You can detail everything we've discussed: burial, cremation preference, service details, music, readings, location for ashes, charitable donations, etc. Keep this document in a safe but accessible place, along with your other important papers, perhaps with your will, insurance policies, and bank account information. Crucially, make sure your executor and/or key family members know that this document exists and where to find it immediately after your passing. A will is often not read until probate begins, which can be weeks or months later, long after funeral arrangements need to be made. So, this separate letter of instruction is vital for timely guidance. You might also consider making several copies and giving one to your executor, one to a close family member, and keeping one yourself. It's also wise to review and update this document every few years, or after significant life changes, like moving, remarriage, or simply changing your mind about something. Your preferences might evolve over time, and your plan should reflect your current wishes. Taking these steps, considering the big questions, thinking about personal touches, and carefully documenting your preferences, transforms an abstract worry into a concrete plan. It provides a clear roadmap for your loved ones, reducing their burden and ensuring your farewell aligns with how you lived your life. It puts you in control. Knowing this plan is in place allows you to release that worry and focus on living fully now. Now that we have a clearer picture of what needs planning and how to document it, we can turn our attention to the often sensitive question of how to pay for it. Should you prepay? What are the different options, the benefits, and the potential risks involved? That's exactly what we'll explore together in our final chapter. So, we've journeyed together through the thoughtful process of planning for your final arrangements. We started by acknowledging that initial hesitation many of us feel when contemplating the end of life. But we reframed it as an act of profound love and responsibility, a way to ease the burden on our loved ones and ensure our own unique story is honored in a way that feels authentic. We then moved into the practicalities in our second chapter, exploring the significant decisions like burial versus cremation, the type of service or gathering that might reflect your personality, be it traditional, a memorial, or a celebration of life, and the many personal details, from music and readings to charitable donations, that can make a farewell truly meaningful. Crucially, we emphasized the importance of documenting these wishes clearly, perhaps in a letter of final instructions, and ensuring your loved ones know where to find this guidance when the time comes. Making these plans, writing them down, is in itself a huge step towards peace of mind. Now, we arrive at that often pondered final piece of the puzzle, the financial aspect. How should you handle the costs associated with the plans you've made? This brings us directly back to the question we posed at the very beginning. Should you prepay? As we've alluded to, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's a decision wrapped in personal circumstances, financial realities, and a careful weighing of potential benefits against potential risks. Let's first clearly understand what prepaying typically involves and why people consider it. The primary appeal lies in potentially locking in today's prices for funeral goods and services, thereby protecting against future inflation, which can be significant over years or decades. Imagine knowing that the major costs of your chosen funeral are covered, regardless of how much prices might rise between now and then. This can feel like a significant relief. Secondly, prepayment aims to lift the financial burden entirely from your family. When they are grieving, the last thing you want is for them to worry about finding thousands of dollars unexpectedly. Prepaying seems like a direct way to prevent that stress, ensuring the funds are allocated specifically for this purpose. These are compelling reasons, aren't they? However, it's essential to approach prepayment with your eyes wide open, understanding the different methods and their potential drawbacks. One common way to prepay is through a pre-need contract directly with a specific funeral home. You sit down with them, select all the services and merchandise, casket, vault, etc., and pay either a lump sum or in installments. The funeral home typically places these funds into a state-regulated trust account or uses them to purchase a small insurance policy earmarked for your funeral. Sounds secure, right? But consider these points carefully. What happens if you move to a different city or state years from now? Pre-need contracts are often not easily transferable to another funeral home, or there might be significant penalties or loss of funds if you cancel or transfer. What if the funeral home you chose goes out of business or changes ownership? While state regulations often require funds to be held in trust for protection, accessing those funds or ensuring the new owners honor the original contract isn't always seamless. It can involve paperwork, delays, and potential shortfalls. Furthermore, you need to scrutinize exactly what is guaranteed by the contract. Often, the funeral home's services and the merchandise they sell directly, like the casket, are price guaranteed. However, costs known as cash advance items, things the funeral home pays for on your behalf, like cemetery fees, closing the grave, clergy honorariums, flowers, death certificates, and newspaper obituaries, are often not price guaranteed. Your family might still face significant extra costs for these items at the time of need, even though you thought you had prepaid everything. You must read the contract meticulously and ask direct questions. Is this specific item's price guaranteed, or is it just an allowance? Another avenue for prepayment is funeral insurance, sometimes called final expense or burial insurance. This is typically a small, whole-life insurance policy designed specifically to cover end-of-life costs. You pay regular premiums, and upon your death, the policy pays out a fixed death benefit to your named beneficiary. The idea is that this beneficiary, often a family member, will use the funds for your funeral. The advantages are that the policy is usually portable, it's not tied to a specific funeral home, and the payout goes directly to your beneficiary. Often, these policies are guaranteed issue, meaning you don't need a medical exam, although there might be a graded benefit period, meaning if death occurs within the first 2 or 3 years, only the premiums paid plus some interest might be returned, not the full face value. However, funeral insurance also has downsides. Depending on your age and health when you take out the policy and how long you live, you could end up paying more in premiums over the years than the actual death benefit your beneficiary receives. Also, the death benefit is fixed. If funeral costs inflate significantly over time, the payout might not be sufficient to cover everything when needed. And crucially, while the intention is for the beneficiary to use the funds for your funeral, they are not legally obligated to do so. They receive the money and can technically use it for anything they choose, though most loved ones would, of course, honor your intentions if clearly expressed. Given these complexities and potential pitfalls associated with formal prepayment methods, it's wise to also consider alternatives for handling funeral expenses. One straightforward approach is to set aside funds yourself. You could open a dedicated savings account or purchase a certificate of deposit, CD, specifically earmarked for final expenses. Even better, you could establish a payable on death (POD) account at your bank. This is essentially a standard savings or checking account, where you designate a beneficiary who will receive the funds directly and immediately upon your death, bypassing the often lengthy probate process. The beauty of this approach is flexibility and control. The money remains yours, earns interest, and is accessible if needed in a true emergency, though the goal is not to touch it. Your beneficiary receives the funds quickly and can use them at any funeral home, paying the actual costs at the time of need. This avoids worries about funeral homes closing or moving states. The main drawback is that the funds aren't price guaranteed against inflation, so you'll need to estimate costs and potentially add to the account over time. And, very importantly, this method absolutely requires that you have prepared that separate letter of final instructions we discussed earlier, so your beneficiary knows precisely how you wish the funds to be used. Without your written wishes, they have the money but no guidance. It's also worth noting that depending on the total value of your assets and state regulations, funds in regular savings or POD accounts might be considered when determining eligibility for certain benefits like Medicaid, which is something to be mindful of. Another alternative is relying on an existing larger life insurance policy, if you have one. Many people have term or whole life insurance policies intended for income replacement or leaving an inheritance. The death benefit from such a policy can certainly be used by your beneficiary to cover funeral costs, along with other final expenses or debts. The advantages are that the policy might already be in place, and the benefit is usually substantial enough to cover costs easily. The disadvantages are similar to funeral insurance. The beneficiary technically controls the funds, and you need to ensure the policy remains active by paying premiums. So, what's the takeaway from all this? There is no single best way to financially prepare for funeral expenses that fits everyone. Prepaying through a funeral home might appeal if locking in specific service prices with a trusted local provider is your top priority, and you understand the contract limitations. Funeral insurance might be considered if you want a dedicated pot of money passed outside of probate, but perhaps don't have a lump sum to set aside now. Setting aside funds in a POD account offers maximum flexibility and control, but requires discipline and clear written instructions for your beneficiary. Relying on existing life insurance works if the policy is secure and the beneficiary understands your wishes. The truly vital thing is not necessarily which method you choose, but that you make a conscious, informed choice based on your circumstances, and crucially, that you pair your financial provision with clearly documented wishes about the funeral or memorial service itself. Planning your arrangements, Chapter 2, and planning for the payment, Chapter 3, go hand in hand. Making these arrangements, thinking through these choices, and documenting them isn't about dwelling on the inevitable end. It's about embracing responsibility, expressing love for your family, and achieving a profound sense of peace in the present. It's about taking gentle control of this final chapter, ensuring it reflects your values and eases the journey for those you leave behind. Facing this topic requires courage, yes, but the relief and reassurance that come from having a plan in place are immeasurable. You empower yourself by seeking information, by asking questions, by reading the fine print, and by making deliberate choices. You empower your loved ones by giving them the incredible gift of clarity during a difficult time. Whether you start small today by simply writing down your preference for burial or cremation, or you decide to delve into detailed planning and financial provision, know that any step you take is significant. It's a testament to your thoughtfulness and care. This process allows you to shape your final legacy not just through the memories you've created, but through the peace and preparedness you provide. Thank you for taking the time to explore this important subject. May your planning bring you comfort, and may you continue to live your life fully, knowing you've tended to these future needs with wisdom and love.